15 U.S. Code Subchapter 2, Restrictions on Garnishment U.S. Code Notes Prev. Next Section 1671. Congressional Findings and Declaration of Purpose Section 1672. Definitions Section 1673. Restriction on Garnishment Section 1674. Restriction on Discharge from Employment by Reason of Garnishment Section 1675. Exemption for State-Regulated Garnishment Section 1676. Enforcement by Secretary of Labor Section 1677. Effect on state laws. (15 U.S. Code Subchapter 2A, Credit Repair Organizations U.S. Code Notes Prev. Next Section 1679. Findings and Purposes Section 1679A. Definitions Section 1679B. Prohibited Practices Section 1679C. Disclosures Section 1679D. Credit Repair Organizations Contracts Section 1679E. Right to cancel contracts Section 1679F. Noncompliance with this subchapter Section 1679 grams. Civil Liability Section 1679H. Administrative Enforcement Section 1679I. Statute of Limitations Section 1679 Joules. Relation to state law. (15 U.S. Code Subchapter 3, Credit Reporting Agencies U.S. Code Notes Prev. Next Section 1681. Congressional Findings and Statement of Purpose Section 1681A. Definitions, Rules of Construction Section 1681B. Permissible Purposes of Consumer Reports Section 1681C. Requirements relating to information contained in Consumer Reports Section 1681C1. Identity Theft Prevention, Fraud Alerts and Active Duty Alerts Section 1681C2. Block of Information Resulting from Identity Theft Section 1681D. Disclosure of Investigative Consumer Reports Section 1681E. Compliance Procedures Section 1681F. Disclosures to Governmental Agencies Section 1681 grams. Disclosures to Consumers Section 1681H. Conditions and Form of Disclosure to Consumers Section 1681I. Procedure in Case of Disputed Accuracy Section 1681 Joules. Charges for Certain Disclosures Section 1681K. Public Record Information for Employment Purposes Section 1681 Liters. Restrictions on Investigative Consumer Reports Section 1681 meters. Requirements on users of Consumer Reports Section 1681N. Civil Liability for Willful Noncompliance Section 1681O. Civil Liability for Negligent Noncompliance Section 1681P. Jurisdiction of Courts. Limitation of Action Section 1681Q. Obtaining Information under False Pretenses Section 1681R. Unauthorized Disclosures by Officers or Employees Section 1681s. Administrative Enforcement Section 1681s 1. Information on overdue child support obligations Section 1681's 2. Responsibilities of furnishers of information to consumer reporting agencies Section 1681's 3. Affiliate sharing Section 1681T. Relation to state laws Section 1681U. Disclosures to FBI for counterintelligence purposes Section 1681 Volt. Disclosures to governmental agencies for counterterrorism purposes Section 1681W. Disposal of records Section 1681 times. Corporate and technological circumvention prohibited. U.S. Code Section 1681X. Corporate and technological circumvention prohibited. U.S. Code notes Prev. Next, the Commission shall prescribe regulations to become effective not later than 90 days after December 4, 2003, to prevent a consumer reporting agency from circumventing or evading treatment as a consumer reporting agency described in Section 1681 App of this title for purposes of this subchapter, including 1. By means of a corporate reorganization or restructuring, including a merger, acquisition, dissolution, divestiture, or asset sale of a consumer reporting agency, or 2. By maintaining or merging public record and credit account information in a manner that is substantially equivalent to that described in paragraphs 1 and 2 of Section 1681 App of this title, in the manner described in Section 1681 App of this title, Pub. L 90-321, Title 6, Section 629, as added Pub. L 108-159, Title 2, Section 211, B, December 4, 2003, 117 Stat 1970. U.S. Code Subchapter IV, Equal Credit Opportunity. U.S. Code Notes Prev. Next, Section 1691. Scope of Prohibition. Section 1691A. Definitions. Rules of Construction Section 1691b. Promulgation of Regulations by the Bureau Section 1691c. Administrative Enforcement Section 1691c1. Incentives for Self-Testing and Self-Correction Section 1691c2. Small Business Loan Data Collection Section 1691d. Applicability of Other Laws Section 1691e. Civil Liability Section 1691f. Annual Reports to Congress. Content. U.S. Code Subchapter V. Debt Collection Practices U.S. Code Notes Prev. Next Section 1692. Congressional Findings and Declaration of Purpose Section 1692a. Definitions Section 1692b. Acquisition of Location Information Section 1692c. Communication in connection with debt collection Section 1692d. Harassment or abuse Section 1692e. False or misleading representation Section 1692f. Unfair practices Section 1692 grams. Validation of debt Section 1692h. Multiple debt Section 1692i. Legal actions by debt collectors Section 1692 joules. Furnishing certain deceptive forms Section 1692k. Civil liability Section 1692 liters. Administrative Enforcement Section 1692 meters. Reports to Congress by the Bureau. Views of other federal agencies Section 1692n. Relation to state laws Section 1692o. Exemption for state regulations Section 1692p. Exception for certain bad check enforcement programs operated by private entities. U.S. Code Subchapter 6. Electronic Fund Transfers U.S. Code Notes Prev. Next Section 1693. Congressional Findings and Declaration of Purpose Section 1693a. Definitions Section 1693b. Regulations Section 1693c. Terms and Conditions of Transfers Section 1693d. Documentation of Transfers Section 1693e. Pre-authorized transfers Section 1693f. Error resolution Section 1693 grams. Consumer liability Section 1693h. Liability of financial institutions Section 1693i. Issuance of cards or other means of access Section 1693 joules. Suspension of obligations Section 1693k. Compulsory use of electronic fund transfers Section 1693 liters. Waiver of rights Section 1693L1. General use prepaid cards, gift certificates, and store gift cards Section 1693 meters. Civil liability Section 1693N. Criminal liability Section 1693O. Administrative enforcement Section 169301. Remittance transfers Section 169302. Reasonable fees and rules for payment card transactions Section 1693p. Reports to Congress Section 1693q. Relation to state laws Section 1693r. Exemption for state regulation